Hey there, everyone. This is Gregg Schutze for ReadyForTheDraft.com, and this is the Ready for the Draft podcast. Hard to believe it's already episode 20. This is the post-season edition, getting you ready for the NFL Draft, which is set to begin April 23rd, Las Vegas, Nevada. Bellagio fountains will be the backdrop. Can't wait. The atmosphere will be electric. Prime time there, Thursday night, the 23rd. Get things going. And when we talk about prime time, we're not just talking about the draft anymore. We're also talking about the combine. Combine's going to be coming up in a couple of weeks. 337 players will be invited or have been invited to the combine. So we're going to take a look at the combine invitees and who really has the most to prove, who are the guys to really keep an eye out for, who are guys that may be flying under the radar, who are the workout warriors. We'll be talking about all that so you can kind of get an idea of what to expect when the combine rolls around and really how that is going to impact the draft. This podcast, I took a couple of week hiatus, if you will, and the reason for that is we had the end of the season, LSU national champions. Congratulations to Coach Ed Orgeron, Joe Burrw and company on the win, beating Clemson. We had the All-Star games, and then after that, you kind of have that lull between the end of the season and really when we ramp up the pre-draft process. So I wanted to make sure I looked at some game film, went through some of my notes, made sure that I had everything together, because this podcast, we are going to take a look at all of those bowl games. What impact did these bowl games have on the draft? Who really stood out? And those are some of the things that we're going to be taking a look at in today's podcast. I also released my first mock draft that is out on the website, readyforthedraft.com. Get a sneak peek in this podcast, talk about my top 10 just a little bit before we wrap things up. But before we get started, a couple of things happened since our last podcast. The first being, the tragic passing of Kobe Bryant and 8 other passengers, including his daughter Gigi. The Altabelli family, the Chesters, Christina Mauser, Ara Zobayan. Devastating news. I grew up in Orange County, and Orange Coast College, that's a school that's really right in the heart of Orange County, right there in Costa Mesa, and it's part of the fabric of the community. And Coach Altabelli, coaching there for 20 plus years, bringing the championships. His legacy, is firmly cemented in Orange County. I know that he'll be sorely missed in the community. So definitely difficult to hear that, that news. But when we talk about Kobe Bryant, I had a special, for me, special connection there with Kobe. I never met the gentleman, but it's one of those things. When I grew up, it was always about Magic Johnson. If you're a Laker fan, it was always about Magic. And growing up, he was my idol, and he was the guy that I really looked up to. But growing up in high school, it was about Kobe Bryant, and beyond. Kobe was 17. Mom signed his first contract. I was in high school, right? Probably a year younger than Kobe at the time. And, I really just felt this connection immediately with him, and the fire and the passion with which he played, and the work ethic and the commitment to excellence. And watching him really grow into the man that he was, that was really special. And it was one of those things to where, as I grew and matured into the man that I am today, I kind of felt like I was on that journey with Kobe, and really excited to see the ventures outside of basketball, for everything that he did on the court and how much that meant. Really seeing him as a father, and really how he stepped into the community and really a pillar of that community in Orange County. All the stories that people talked about with, here's a guy who has all these different ventures, and yet he still had the time to send a text message or call someone and check in on them. When you talk about the Mamba mentality and out on the basketball court. It's about the killer instinct. And, you look at a lot of the players that we'll be talking about, and they have that killer instinct. Do they have the work ethic that Kobe Bryant has? I don't know that there's anybody that quite has that type of work ethic, but, wanting to be the very best version of yourself. And that's one of the things, I think that's the best way to honor Kobe, is to live with that Mamba mentality every single day. Be the best version of yourself every single day. Be there for your friends, be there for your family, be there, with your craft, honing your craft. I think that's what's really most important. I think that's the thing for me that I look at going forward is, I want to, the best way that I can honor, Kobe is to live that Mamba mentality each and every day. So transitioning, and this is kind of an awkward transition, but moving from Kobe to the Super Bowl. We had Super Bowl 54 that took place in Miami, Kansas City taking down San Francisco. Patrick Mahomes, the MVP, and I'll tell you what, this was a guy who, through 3 quarters, he was really rattled by that 49er defense. Nick Bosa had the 49ers won. I mean, this is a guy who had 12 pressures. He was really making things difficult for Patrick Mahomes. I'd argue that Nick Bosa was worthy of that Super Bowl MVP had the Niners won. Patrick Mahomes, though, when the chips were all on the table, this was the guy who rose to the occasion. And I'll tell you what, I kind of missed the boat. I'll be perfectly honest, when I was talking about Patrick Mahomes before the 2017 draft. And the reason being, when I look at Patrick Mahomes, this was the guy who I talked about his athleticism, his ability to, make any throw, whether he was rolling left, rolling right, backpedaling, moving forward. He was able to throw the ball down the field and connect with his receivers, drop in the arm angle whenever possible to make the throw easier. The thing with it, though, was he seemed to play, be at his best really when he was outside the confines of an offense. And I was a little short-sighted with this because, frankly, he went to the perfect team, the perfect coach. Andy Reid adjusted his offense for Patrick Mahomes. And that's really the recipe that you see now is teams, they're not looking to take a quarterback and have him conform to their offense. What they're doing is, you look at Cliff Kingsbury and his offense, and you bring in Kyler Murray, and what does Kyler Murray do? Kyler Murray with his athleticism and getting outside the pocket and making plays on the move, and he ran that spread offense there at Oklahoma, comes to Arizona, and you see that more often, that teams are now adjusting to the players. And it used to be the other way around. And I think I missed the boat there with that because, there was no question that Patrick Mahomes had the best arm talent, had the best athleticism of anybody, any quarterback in that draft. And I think I was short-sighted with the fact that I said, he's got to play within the confines of an offense. He's going to have to stay within the pocket in order to get things done. And when you look at a lot of the quarterbacks, you talk about the guys who have had success, the Breezes, the Rodgers, the Mannings, the Brady's, these are guys that, they get outside, they manipulate the pocket, and get outside a little bit, but where they really did their damage was within the pocket. And, I think Patrick Mahomes is kind of that new breed of quarterback. The biggest question mark, though, is going to be, can he stay healthy? Can he sustain that? And that's really going to be the biggest question mark for him. But, hats off to him. He had a tremendous season. And really a great start to his career, and the future's looking bright there for Kansas City. So, took care of a couple of items that I wanted to make sure that we talked about before we jumped into taking a look at the bowl game. So we're going to go ahead and jump in now. You'll hear me flipping through the pages here of my notebook. Got all of my notes here, but LSU Clemson national title game. We're going to go ahead and start there and just kind of work our way backward a little bit. In the Mercedes-Benz Superdome there in New Orleans, a virtual home game there for LSU. LSU comes out on top, 42-25. And Joe Burrw, my goodness, 31 of 49, 463 yards, 5 touchdown passes, 14 carries, 58 yards, and another score. This is a guy who just the poise, the pocket presence, his ability to manipulate the pocket. We talked about that, a little earlier here, but his ability to, slide in the pocket, the subtlety there. It reminds you of Aaron Rodgers with his ability to do that, slide and then step up and avoid the rush, keeping your eyes down the field, hitting a receiver in stride down the field, going through progressions. You'd see him, look one direction to Justin Jefferson, and then he'd look, opposite way for Terrace Marshall, and then ultimately find Ja'Marr Chase late streaking down the field, or possibly finding Thaddeus Moss underneath, or a check down to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He always seemed to know where he was going with the football. And to me, Joe Burrow has solidified himself as the number one overall pick. I mean, how could he not? He swept all the major awards, including the Heisman Trophy, college football playoff MVP. And, this is a kid who is primed and ready to be the number one overall pick. Who's he going to go to? There were rumors, people kicking around the fact that, hey, Cincinnati could trade, get multiple picks, possibly to Miami. Chargers can make a play for him. All these teams that could potentially move up. But if I'm Cincinnati, this is a kid who grew up in Ohio. This is Ohio native. And, if I'm Zach Taylor, I'm looking at Joe Burrow, and this is the future of my franchise. He's the face of Cincinnati football, and I've got to get him in. I've got to get him acclimated and ready to go as quickly as possible. He's looking for his franchise quarterback, and Joe Burrow is right there. I thought Joe Burrow was tremendous. You look at Justin Jefferson, and I personally believe that Justin Jefferson is a first round receiver. 6'3", 192. The junior. This is a guy who just, the subtleties with his route running was incredible. 9 catches, 106 yards, and what he does is he finds the space in the defense, and he runs his routes accordingly. He just he's able to and when he runs those routes, he's able to find that space and get himself open. And he does a great job tracking the ball, excellent hands, fights through traffic and shows those hands. And to me, I thought Justin Jefferson absolutely shined, going up against Darian Kendrick, AJ Terrell. I thought that was really important to go up against some of the better corners there in the ACC. And I thought it was really a lot of fun to watch. Speaking of AJ Terrell, this is a guy who, I thought, he really wanted to jam his receivers at the line, using his length to his advantage whenever possible. But Chase, Ja'Marr Chase was beating him deep, and really, Chase would get a step, he'd lose contact with the receiver. And ultimately, the receiver tracking the ball well over his shoulder on a 52-yard touchdown. AJ Terrell, to me, 6'1", 190-pound junior, definitely very physical man corner. But I'll tell you what, he's someone who I think any chance that he was going to be a first-round pick, I think went out the door. I think he's going to be someone who's going to probably be a day 2 pick, probably second roundish, late second. But I think he's opened the door for a lot of other corners to pass him overall. Now, Ja'Marr Chase, 6'1", 200 sophomore. He's not eligible for this year's draft. It's just a shame. 9 receptions, 221 yards, 2 touchdowns. The guy just wasn't. Nobody could cover him in the game. I mean, it was tremendous to watch. His ability to beat receiver or beat corners deep. The ability to track the ball over his shoulder, I thought was impressive. Lining up in the slot, going against AJ Terrell, got a step on him. Able to stack him, track the ball over his shoulder. Ultimately, he planted at about the 20-yard line. Cornerback ran by, then cut back to the inside and went down to the 4-yard line on another play. I'm sorry, it wasn't a touchdown, but it was a 56-yard catch. Just a tremendous athlete. He'll be, definitely one of the receivers, if not number one. I'd be surprised if he's not the number one receiver when we're talking about him in 2021. K'Lavon Chaisson, 6'4", 6'5"-ish, 250 pounds. The junior, excellent length. He did a really good job extending the arm, long arm in the left tackle, to gain some space and help get to the edge coming around the corner. This is a guy who was relentless. He fell down, got up, still got inside. The left tackle, Jackson Carman, who's a pretty good left tackle, got a hit on the quarterback. He's one of those guys who I think does a really good job. As he's bending around the edge, not only does he do a good job, with the jump off the football, explosive first step, but he slaps the hands of the lineman, bends around the edge really well. The hip flexibility, the ankle flexion, his ability to take those extreme angles as he's turning the corner to get after the quarterback, and then he sets a really, really hard edge against the run, and that's one of the things that, I'm trying not to have Barkevius Mingo flashbacks because they have similar body types. And Mingo really didn't live up to the billing as a top 10 talent. I think Chason's going to be outside the top 10, but he definitely showed that he's one of those guys that, is just going to continue to put pressure on the quarterback. Even when he didn't get to Trevor Lawrence, I think Trevor Lawrence had him in the back of his mind, worrying about him coming off the edge. Now, let's see. Kristian Fulton, the 6 foot, 200 pound junior, this is a guy who, is someone who, could he be a first round pick? Is he a second round pick? I think at the end of the day, he's going to end up being a first rounder. I don't think I have him in my first mock draft, but looking at some of the game film, the freshman, Joseph Nata, had a step on him. He was able on a slant route. He was trailing him, able to still get a hand in and knock the ball away. One of the things that I do like about Fulton is he really doesn't panic. It's one of those things to where he does a really good job driving on the football, even when he's beaten. The makeup speed, he's physical. He'll jam you. And I thought one of the things too that he did with T. Higgins, who kept getting inside leverage on him. He was really setting up, had the outside leverage and forcing Higgins to the inside and really bottled Higgins up. I thought he and Derek Stingley, who, man, he's only a freshman, 2022 draft, look out. Derek Stingley, possible top 5 pick. But I thought that was one of the things that really stood out was Fulton really gave T. Higgins some trouble. When you look at T. Higgins, the flip side there, I think Fulton being a first round pick, T. Higgins, 6'4", 215 pounds, excellent size. Pro Football Focus reported that, I think, 15 of the 23 deep ball targets, he hauled in for 545 yards. In 2019. So definitely a deep threat, but it was one of those things though that you worry about whether or not Higgins can separate. Can he actually separate down the field? That's going to be the biggest worry. And I don't think he really, he did anything to really fix that those question marks. Just 3 catches for 27 yards in the game. T. Higgins, is he going to be a first rounder? Is he going to be a second rounder? There's some more explosive athletes, as we go on when we're talking about this, from the Jalen Ragers to the Brandon Ayuks, and we're not even talking about the Justin Jeffersons and Laviska Shenault, Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb. I think T. Higgins might be the odd man out when we're talking about first rounds. He may actually slide to the top of round 2. Could be a steal for someone. Cortland Sutton was the guy that some people were talking about as a potential first rounder. He fell to round number 2. We see what he's been able to do for Denver. So, we'll see what happens there with T. Higgins. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 5'8", 209, the junior. I think one of the things that you really saw was the tremendous ability as a receiver. Runs angle routes very well, does a good job, along the sideline as well. Just very soft hands, runs through contact. The contact balance is tremendous. He's built low to the ground. Reminds you a lot of Maurice Jones-Drew with the way that he's built. He's just a bowling ball, runs through contact. I've got him as my number 4 running back, especially now that Travis Etienne has decided that he's going to come back for a senior year. I think that's probably a good move for Travis Etienne. I think as he's been building his skill set, a season ago, we talked about him just being a burner, and this year I thought we saw more power out of him. He was running through a lot of arm tackles, better hands, and I think just continuing to hone that skill set. I think we were talking about potential second, third round range for him, and I think with Etienne, what he's going to be able to show is an ability. He may be the top running back in next year's draft if he can just continue to develop his game, show some more power, better hands, show an ability to pass block, because he has a different gear in space, and I think that's what makes him special. Grant Delpit, this is a guy that 18 missed tackles. I think that's one of the things that really a lot of people talked about. And that obviously is a concern, but he was also playing hurt. He was battling an ankle injury. In this game, he had a hamstring injury that he was battling as well. But had a big hit right to the thigh of T. Higgins, put his helmet right on the ball, drilled it to knock the ball free. He's one of those guys who has tremendous range. I think the 18 missed tackles, that is concerning, but he's also one of those guys, he needed to be healthy. I think a healthy Grant Delpit is a guy who's still worthy of a first round pick. I think that's one of the things that he's going to prove when he goes through the pre-draft process, and his draft stock may fall because of those missed tackles. And, I thought that, 2019 wasn't as good a year for him as 2018. And at the same time, he still won the Jim Thorpe Award. So, what do I know? But to me, I think, Grant Delpit, at least in this game, showed his ability, the range over the top, his ability to play in the box, some of that versatility that you need. And speaking of versatility, Isaiah Simmons, the 6'4", 230-pound junior linebacker, top 10 pick, absolutely. This guy was split out in deep coverage versus Thaddeus Moss on one play. And then he's bending around the left tackle to get to the quarterback on the next. Showed an ability to, just the presence of mind, knowing when to blitz, when to take off, and then wrapped up Clyde Edwards-Helaire on a spin move, never let him get away. Just such a sure tackler as well. The range, sideline to sideline, he was on the hip of Edwards-Helaire. No separation on an out route to the wide side. Guy can do a little bit of everything. He can do it all. Just a special player, and I think he solidified himself as a top 10 talent for this draft. John Simpson, the guard, 6'4", 330 pounds. Pulled around, showed decent athleticism, getting to the second level. But this is a guy who's going to anchor inside. He's not the best athlete in the world, but really, has a good base to him. Can get low, bends at the knees very well. He's a guy who's going to get, he's going to maul you. He's very nasty, and I think he's going to be a day one starter. And I think this game he really proved that, he held up pretty well against LSU's front, and I think that's one of the things that really stood out for me. Thaddeus Moss, had a couple of touchdowns in the game, and shows that he's a really good receiver. I think he still needs to work on some of his blocking, but the hands are absolutely there. His athleticism is there. We saw body control earlier in the year. I think it was actually in the SEC title game. The balance along the sideline to extend for the football. Almost going completely horizontal to haul in the pass while keeping his feet in bounds. He's one of those guys. I think probably third, fourth round range is probably where he'll go. But I think his career is off to a bright start. Let's see. How do we want to do this? We're going to go ahead. We're going to jump around a little bit here. So let's see. We're going to go ahead and talk about. We'll take the Sugar Bowl next, and we'll look at Georgia against Baylor. Georgia. And Andrew Thomas didn't play. Isaiah Wilson didn't play. So two tackles that are out, and you're going up against the likes of James Lynch, Bravion Roy, James Lockhart, three guys that really wreaked havoc for the Baylor Bears. They're in the Big 10 or Big 12, and Georgia just handled it. The 26-14 was the final. And it was one of those things where it really wasn't all that close. Charlie Brewer The quarterback, got knocked out of the Big 12 championship with a concussion, got knocked out again. This was a guy tremendously tough, but just was getting beat up left and right, unfortunately. Jake Fromm, 42nd consecutive start, 34-7 record. They posted that. And it's one of those things where you really started to see him developing some chemistry with those receivers. I think that's one of the reasons why I thought he had a down year in 2019. He had a lot of young receivers. George Pickens, he and Pickens really connected. Hit him on 30 yards down the field on a flea flicker for a 46-yard gain. Showed some touch as well to get it into him on a fade up the sideline. 16-yard touchdown pass to Matt Landers. Ran a post, put the ball right on the receiver. Jake Fromm, at the end of the day, what was it? It was 20 of 30 for 250 yards and a couple of touchdowns. Not any staggering numbers, but definitely got the job done. George Pickens, I think, is going to end up being a star. 12 receptions, 175 yards, and a touchdown in the game. They were without DeAndre Swift, who didn't really have much of an impact in the game. Didn't play a whole lot. One of the offensive linemen that was there was Solomon Kinley, the 6'4", 335-pound junior who decided to enter the draft. Showed that he was able to climb to the second level, did so under control, good base, really going up against Bravion Roy. I thought that was one of the things that was really, impressive for me. But I thought he was inconsistent with his hands, and he whiffed on a block with the left tackle on a sack by James Lynch. He was coming over to help and completely whiffed on James Lynch, who ultimately ended up getting to the quarterback for the sack. But he's not somebody you're going to expect to get out and pull all that off. And he's a guy. He and Andrew Thomas, look, in the running game, they were just mauling guys, generating a ton of movement. Road grader, a guy who could probably come in and start right away. Speaking of James Lynch, one of my favorite players, this is a guy who, has a knack, he does a really good job getting up the field. He's 6'4", 285 pounds, and he bends very well for his size. He got up the field, and then did a really good job getting back inside, showing a spin move, getting a straight line to the quarterback, flattening out, getting to him. Again, starting up the field, gets to the outside, and then showed an arm over versus a tight end to get back to the inside to the quarterback. Very violent hands, moving the left tackle back, overpowering him, shoving him up the field, coming off the block, and getting to the quarterback, getting a sack. James Lynch, to me, is a guy who he'll be a day 2 pick, but he's one of those guys I think we'll be talking about as where did this guy come from type of a thing, because I think he's someone who's going to make an impact at the next level. Bravion Roy is a guy, he's not invited to the combine, 6'1", 333 pounds, the nose tackle. I thought that he got blown back off the ball in this game by Solomon Kinley, but he did see frequent double teams in the middle. And it's one of those things to where he's very explosive off the ball, and that's one of the things that he's not the biggest guy, and has those shorter arms, but he's very active and he shoots the gaps really well. The problem for him, though, is that if he doesn't beat you with quickness, he doesn't quite have the strength to really hold the point of attack. And that's really the biggest thing for Bravion Roy. I think he was playing the nose tackle. I think he may be out of position, but he's 6'1" and 333 pounds. That first step quickness, that's really where he's going to win. And I think in a 4-3 defense, that's really where Bravion Roy, I think, if he gets a chance at the next level, that's really where he's gonna need to take over. Denzel Mims, the receiver, 6'3", 215 pounds. Mims, 5 receptions, 75 yards, and a touchdown in the game. This was a guy who I thought, didn't always separate from DJ Daniel, the corner, but did a really good job to extend his arm into the corner to create some late separation, able to adjust to the ball really well. Tight coverage against Eric Stokes, and ball got into him a little bit, a little quicker than he expected, but one of the things that I thought he does really well is he tracks the ball over his shoulder, shows excellent body control, catches the ball over his shoulder in stride, excellent hands for the most part. Does a really good job too fighting through the jam. Corner's going to try to jam him. Does a really good job fighting through that and then getting down the field. Because if you're even, you're leaving, and that's what Denzel Mims was able to do quite a bit. if we move to the Rose Bowl and you had Oregon and Wisconsin, I'll tell you what, I mean, these were two heavyweights. The number 6 Ducks able to beat Wisconsin 28-27 in the Rose Bowl. And Justin Herbert, look, just 14 of 20 for 138 yards, an interception, had 9 carries for 29 yards, 3 touchdowns, had a long of 30 yards. And this is a guy, look, he's going to be one of the most polarizing players for this draft. And what's going to happen with Justin Herbert, that's going to be the big question mark. And, I don't think there's an easy answer when you're talking about Herbert, because the completion percentage can fool you sometimes because of the way that the offense is run. I think the intermediate throws, he struggles at times. You see the ball sail a lot of times and overthrow receivers. And, but he makes good decisions, on where he's going to go with the football. He has tremendous arm talent, and the biggest question for me when I study Justin Herbert is, are the skills going to be able to translate to the next level? He's absolutely an intelligent guy, the Campbell Trophy Award winner, 4.01 GPA. I didn't even know you can go over a 4.0 in college, but he was able to do that. And, I worry a little bit about, his ability in some of the games. He was able to figure out a way to win. And I think that at the end of the day, that's the biggest thing. And I compare him more and more to Josh Allen, and Josh Allen's really been able to get the job done there for the Bills, showing some promise. I think, Justin Herbert is going to be I think that's a similar comparison for me. Jonathan Taylor, the 5'11", 219-pound running back there for Wisconsin, another 2,000-yard season back-to-back. Only other running back to do that was Troy Davis back in the 90s. Just 21 carries, 94 yards, had a couple of receptions for 43 yards. Had a drop as well, though. And the biggest frustrating thing, for me when it comes to Jonathan Taylor is the ball security. 18 fumbles, 15 lost in his career. There was a fumble that he had against, he was fighting for extra yards. Troy Dye comes in and he ripped it out and made it look easy. There really wasn't any fight to it. And he just, as he stood up, he just ripped it right out of there. And when you're talking about an elite back, that's something that's really worrisome for me is just the ball security, the ball skills as a receiver as well. And I think that's why he's falling a little bit on people's draft boards. I have him behind JK Dobbins and DeAndre Swift because of some of the issues with the ball security. I think his patience, his vision, his explosiveness, he runs with some power as well. But, if you can't hold on to the football, you're not going to stay out on the football field, and that's really the biggest concern. Zach Bond, 6'3", 235, outside linebacker. This is a guy, loops around on a third down, round by the tackle. I'm sorry, it was actually a guard on a stunt. Ran right by him, got to the quarterback. Also showed an ability to drop in coverage a little bit, which was really surprising. Not expecting I don't think Justin Herbert was expecting him to drop in coverage. Was able to make a play on the ball. Brady Breeze. He was only a junior, but this was a guy who worked his way into the starting lineup and never relinquished it. Having him at safety, and then, Javon Holland got to play that nickelback position as a result. He's the guy to keep an eye out for, as obviously as Epenesa Sewell, the left tackle, dominant as ever. This is a guy, I'll tell you, he has a chance to be one of the top 2 or 3 players in the draft overall. I thought Tyler Biadasz, had a solid game in the middle there for Wisconsin. Kayvon Thibodeau lined up inside the fabulous freshman there for the Ducks and just ran right by him. I worry about Biadasz and the athleticism. I think, you've got some other centers like Lloyd Cushenberry, who I thought played really well in both of LSU's bowl games. I thought, you have him, you have Matt Hennessy, who's one of the best pass protectors there at the center position, if not the best in this year's draft. Cesar Ruiz of Michigan is also making a play. If they show at the combine, more athleticism than Tyler Biadasz, then Tyler could fall a little bit in the draft. He's been a technician. He's been there from day one, started every game. He's been the man in the middle every time Jonathan Taylor has taken the field. So I think, that says a lot about what he's been able to do. Also, Wisconsin lost three offensive linemen to the draft. Cole Van Landen was a part-time starter at left tackle, so really kind of 3.5 starters. And Tyler Biadasz showed the leadership there in the middle for that team. I think the jury is going to be out on Tyler Biadasz. He's going to have to show out pretty well, in some of the workouts. Minnesota getting the win over Auburn, 31-24. I'll say here, Derek Brown was dominant. This is a guy who, stood up the left tackle, able to shed the block and quickly get after the football. So powerful with his hands. What he does really well with the hands is that strike, gets the guy off balance, and then he's able to use his speed, and get by. Overpowers guys, drives people into the backfield, blows up plays. He may not even be the guy that's actually making the tackle, but he's going to affect the run play, driving guys back into the backfield. Tyler Johnson, the receiver, 6'2", 205, the senior. A lot of people not all that high on Tyler. 12 receptions, 204, and 2 touchdowns. I think he's smooth. I think that's one of the things that you can say about him. He has a knack for getting open, can high point the ball on the post. Didn't really create a ton of separation there, but I thought, he really shows some good route running on slants. Able to win off the line and able to, that's really where he was making a lot of the yards there against Auburn was with his ability on those slants. And that's the thing that I think when it's all said and done, teams are going to have to look at Tyler Johnson and how you want to use him. I think some people have talked about him being a 5th rounder. That might be a little harsh. He's probably a late 4th round pick. He may fall into the 5th round. It just kind of depends on what he runs in the 40. I'm a huge Antoine Winfield Jr. fan. 5'11", 205. I guess he's technically still a redshirt sophomore. All the injuries that he's battled. All-American, first team All-Big Ten. And I just have in big letters, ball hawk. Excellent cover skills. Lining up over the slot, was blitzing off the edge as well, ran by the running back block and came off and hit the quarterback. He's a guy, he's not all that big, but the instincts are absolutely there. He'll be a day 2 guy, but I've got him actually as my number 3 safety. He's a guy who just makes plays. He's a playmaker. And at the end of the day, when you get to the next level, teams are going to be looking for playmakers, and that is absolutely what he is. Noah Igbenogany, 5'11", 200-pound junior corner, showed speed on the 96-yard kickoff return for touchdowns, wants to get his hands into the receiver whenever possible, very quick hips to turn and run with the receiver as well. Jack Driscoll, an offensive lineman, right tackle, 6'5", 295, beaten by Carter Coughlin as a stand-up rusher, but he was able to keep his feet, didn't panic, and able to drive him up the field. Kept his hands there with Carter Coughlin. I think that's one of the things that's impressive about some of these tackles. Do they panic? Do they end up opening up and really, exposing that edge and giving him more of a soft edge coming off to get to the quarterback? Or are they taking their man and adjusting and recovering and driving the man down the field away from the pocket? That's what Jack Driscoll was able to do. And then Marlon Davidson, 6'3", 278, showed a quick stutter, ran by the left tackle, Sam Schluter, as a stand-up defensive end on a 3rd down play. Good hands, showed pretty good ability bending around the edge. Better bend than I thought he did. Really good motor, always keeps working to the quarterback. He's one of those guys that, it's interesting because you don't think of him as that player because Derek Brown is the guy that he's playing next to. But I think he's one of those guys. He's a veteran and somebody who I think you're going to have to keep an eye on when it's all said and done. Alabama beating Michigan 35-16 in the Citrus Bowl. Jedrick Wills, tell you what, best offensive lineman in the draft. I've got him going number 4 to the Giants. Spoiler alert. They got to figure out what they're going to do with Mike Remmers, and the best offensive lineman in the draft also happens to be a right tackle, and the Giants are picking number 4. That's where I've got Jedrick Wills going. This is a guy, his pass sets, it looks so effortless. I thought the kick slide, his ability, he takes great angles, shows really good hands, and generates movement in the running game. Obviously Jerry Jeudy, people talking about him, 6'1", 192 junior, 6 receptions, 204 yards and a touchdown. So explosive. Had an 85-yard touchdown on the first play from scrimmage. In the slot, ran a post, ran by Daxton Hill, the freshman, catch and run. He's somebody to me that, the route running ability, so sudden in and out of his breaks. He does have some concentration lapses, make some drops, but the route running ability and his suddenness and his speed down the field, those are things that you just can't teach. Henry Ruggs the third, 6 foot, 190 pounds. Look, Henry Ruggs just 2 catches for 27 yards. He's a speed demon. He's a guy who can track the ball down the football field. One of those things. He's a speed guy, better route runner than I think people give him credit for. But you really want to, is he good? Is he a one-trick pony? That's really the biggest question mark that I have for him. Let's see, John Runyon, 6'5", 321. I think he's going to be a guard. I think when we looked at him in the All-Star games, he looked much more comfortable at the guard position than a tackle, was flat-footed at times in this game, and Anthony Jennings able to quickly get him off balance and shoot inside and get to the quarterback. Speaking of Anthony Jennings, he has tremendous length, shows some speed, able to track down Donovan Peoples-Jones on a reverse, stayed at home, able to track him down, to the wide side of the field. Does a good job getting up the field as well, pursuing the quarterback, leaving the pocket, able to get a sack on a play. Very physical with the right tackle, Jalen Mayfield, able to extend, drive him back, throw him aside, and pursued the quarterback. I thought Anthony Jennings showed up really well. Josh Uche showed some speed inside off the edge, getting to the quarterback, hitting him as he was throwing, made an off-target throw, 8.5 sacks. He's somebody to me who I think is going to be a day 2 pick. Let's see. Cesar Ruiz, very agile, climbing to the second level, gets his hands on the defensive tackle early and able to get his hips around, able to seal off the defensive lineman. I thought he's one of those guys to me that he'll get too far over his feet at times and really kind of get overextended, and that's really where he gets him into trouble. But he's a very good athlete, a guy who can get to the second level, and that's why I think he may end up getting drafted before Tyler Biadasz does. And for a while, I never thought that was actually going to happen. Utah taking on Texas in the Alamo Bowl, 38-10. Texas winning over Utah. Sam Ehlinger, 12 of 18, 204 yards, 3 touchdowns and an interception. Showed some good wheels with his legs, 75 yards on the ground and a touchdown as well. He's coming back, but Devin Duvernay as receiver, 3 receptions, 92 yards and a touchdown. He was his go-to guy, one of the top receivers in terms of receptions per game, has really good speed in and out of his breaks. Joseph Osai is going to be in the draft next year, I have a feeling. Only a sophomore this year. 9 tackles, 3 sacks, 6 tackles for loss. Utah just didn't have an answer for him. I thought Zach Moss was contained, just 57 yards on the ground. Tyler Huntley struggled to get anything going. Bradley Anae is one of those guys, he doesn't look all that athletic. He has shorter arms as well. But man, Bradley Anae just is a guy who just is always going to play hard. He has very powerful hands, and that's one of the things that you see. He wins with his hands. Even when he doesn't have the length necessarily to turn the corner, he wins with his hands. And that's one of the things that I think you don't always see out of guys that are coming out of the college ranks, the collegiate ranks. And Utah, in this game, they were without Jalen Johnson, the corner. They were without Julian Blackman. So there were guys that they were missing there on the back end of their defense, and that really showed against Texas. They struggled mightily and wound up losing that game. Let's see. Let's get through a few of these other games as well as we go through this. I'm going to move back here. The Lending Tree Bowl, Louisiana taking out Miami of Ohio, 27-17. In this game, you're really expecting, when you're looking at Louisiana, you're talking about the 3-headed monster, the running backs, Raymond Calais and Trey Regis and Elijah Mitchell. And Raymond Calais didn't get a whole lot on the ground, didn't get much of a chance to really touch the football, just 5 carries. He'll still be able to showcase what he can do at the combine. He's a smaller back of the three there at Louisiana. Regis and Mitchell coming back for one more year. Jamarcus Bradley, though, showed that he can be a playmaker. 7 receptions, 88 yards, 2 touchdowns. One of the bigger receivers. He'll be at the combine as well. I think he's a guy who can make some plays down the football field. He's going to have to somehow separate himself from this loaded draft class. He may end up being a guy who's going to be undrafted, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up making it onto a roster, possibly on a practice squad. And then Miami of Ohio has Doug Costin, the defensive tackle, very physical at the point of attack. But I thought Kevin Dodson, when we were talking about guards and who's going to make an impact, I thought Kevin Dodson, when he lined up against Doug Costin, he really neutralized any playmaking ability there, and I thought that was one of the big key differences in allowing them to go ahead and get that win. Tennessee taking on Indiana in the Gator Bowl. Tennessee with the 1-point victory, 23-22. Guy I really wanted to watch was Darrell Taylor. He absolutely delivered 6 tackles, 1.5 sacks, 2 total tackles for loss. Read a screen to the tight end. Did a really good job getting back outside for a tackle for loss. Bends very well coming off the edge. Uses his hands, slaps the left tackle's hands away as he's turning the corner. And again, I just have it again. Hands to beat the left tackle off the edge. The shows excellent strength, core strength, the flexibility, dipping underneath the pad level, very explosive burst, flattening out, chasing down the quarterback. The next play, an inside move versus a left guard, hands to get off the block, and ultimately a rip move and chase down the quarterback. Very relentless pursuing the quarterback as well. 6'4", 255 pounds. He's one of the edge rushers that people aren't really talking about, but they should be. I thought Trey Smith, the guard, 6'6", 325 pounds, battled the blood clots. He's someone who is coming back for his senior season, and I applaud him for that. He has a chance to be the number 1 guard. I think what he's really shooting for is to be a first-round pick. I thought, there was some inconsistency to his tape, and if he can clean things up a little bit, I think Trey Smith has a chance to be a first-rounder next year. Juwan Jennings, 6'3", 208, physical downfield target, adjusts well to the back shoulder throws, agile in the open field to make the first man miss, very powerful as a blocker as well. He's one of those guys flying under the radar. His stock will drop. He'll still be a day 2 pick in my opinion, but he's one of those guys to me that I think is climbing up draft boards, and I think teams are really going to fall in love with him the more that they watch his game film. Tulane taking out Southern Miss 30-13. The guy I really wanted to watch though was Quez Watkins. Ultimately entered the draft, 9 receptions, 154 yards, and a touchdown. That's a 17.1 yard per catch average. This is a guy over 1,100 yards this past season, 6 touchdowns. Just a playmaker on the outside. Again, another guy who's going to have to separate himself, but somebody who I think is a draftable prospect. Let's see, Ohio taking on Nevada. Ohio getting the win, 30-21. The Bobcats beating the Wolfpack in the Idaho Potato Bowl. Guy I was really watching was Javon Hagan, 6', 215 pounds, safety, 3 tackles and a sack in the game. Feels very well downhill, dropping the running back in the open field for no gain. Decent range over the top as well. Did a pretty good job blitzing, beat the running back's block, got in for a sack. Elijah Cooks is going to be one of those underrated receivers in next year's draft. The junior, 6'4", 215 pounds for the Wolfpack. Man, this kid, 14 receptions, 197 yards, and a touchdown. Really, one of those receivers that, I think is pretty dynamic. And then there's Nathan Rourke. We talk about, some of these playmakers. You look at Taysom Hill. I think Nathan Rourke has a little bit of Taysom Hill to him. 6'1", 210 pounds, over 7,000 yards passing, and then another 2,500 rushing yards as well. And, very dynamic as a runner on the outside. I thought he's not much of a passer per se, but 10 carries, 87 yards, showed an ability to run the football. I think he has some of that versatility. I don't know that he'll be playing quarterback at the next level, but I see him as a Taysom Hill type. Cincinnati taking out Boston College in the Birmingham Bowl, 38-6. Michael Warren, 21 carries, 105 yards in the contest. And Michael Warren, they nickname him Truck. He runs the ball hard between the tackles, offers some pretty good hands. Didn't really get to showcase him in this game. Look, Desmond Ridder, only 95 yards through the air. He also had 105 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns in the game. Desmond Ridder is going to be a quarterback to keep an eye on next year. Just see how he does, see how he develops. Josiah DeGuara showing off his ability to block. Three catches for 12 yards as well. Wasn't all that dynamic a receiver there at Cincinnati, but just a reliable target. You really want to see how he runs at the combine, though. George Kittle, when he came out of Iowa, wasn't really asked to be a major pass catcher in the Hawkeye offense, but then he came out and blew up the combine. When you go back and you take a look at the numbers, ran in the 4.6s and just jumping out of the building. You want to see how guys like Josiah DeGuara, guys who, wasn't always asked to be a huge factor in the passing game. What type of athlete is he? And that's really the big question that I'm going to have when we get into the combine for him. So as we continue to move along here, we get through, let's see, Wyoming taking out Georgia State 38-17 in the Arizona Bowl. The one guy that I was really watching here was Logan Wilson, 7 tackles and a tackle for loss in the game. Logan Wilson can do a little bit of everything. Over 400 tackles in his career, 6'2", 230 pounds. Decent fluidity and coverage. I thought he showed sideline to sideline range as well. Quick change of direction. Decent job dropping into throwing lanes, getting his hand up to affect the throw. He's someone that I think will be a day 3 pick. I think he'll get drafted a little bit higher than expected. Coming out of the Mountain West Conference, you see guys like Nick Vigil, guys that teams weren't really talking about, ends up being a mid, day 3 guy and ends up starting at the next level. I think Logan Wilson's a guy. I don't see him unless he blows it up at the combine. I don't see him making it into the 3rd round. I think he'll probably be a 4th or 5th round pick. I don't think he gets past the 5th round, but a guy who makes plays all over the field. Navy 20-17 winners over Kansas State in the Liberty Bowl. I think this was all about Malcolm Perry. 28 carries, 213 yards. Yes, he also threw for 57 yards in a touchdown on 5 of 7 passing, but just so elusive in space. His ability, to make guys miss, so dynamic. And he's one of those guys who I think is going to end up being a receiver at the next level. Keenan Reynolds was a receiver. He's now with the XFL. And I look at Malcolm Perry, he's more explosive. He's much more explosive. And he's one of those guys to where, I think if teams can be patient with him, allow him to develop a little bit, you may have something there. Malcolm Perry, definitely one of those special players there coming out of the Naval Academy. Arizona State taking on Florida State in the Sun Bowl, 20-14 final. Florida State, 4 interceptions out of James Blackman. Tamorian Terry decided he's going to come back for one more year, had a big game, 9 receptions, 165 yards and a touchdown. Arizona State without Eno Benjamin and without Brandon Ayuk. I thought defensively, they've got a couple of kids who could potentially come out in next year's draft. Darian Butler, the middle linebacker, 11 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, and Merlin Robertson, the middle linebacker, 8 tackles, 1.5 sacks, 2 tackles for loss. Those are 2 guys who are dynamic at that linebacker position. Herm Edwards, definitely those are the leaders of his defense. Belk Bowl, 37-30 winners, Kentucky over Virginia Tech. Deshaun McClease, decided to enter the draft. He's one of those running backs who's going to have to utilize the combine to really start, really emerge, make a statement. The workouts, make a statement, make teams go back and look at more game film for you. I think he'll probably get drafted at some point, but I don't see it being earlier than probably the 6th round. Kentucky, though, this was all about the Lynn Bowden show, and he's playing quarterback. This is really a receiver, and he was just 6 of 12 for 73 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. He was, I think, 43% completion percentage, just off the top of my head for the season. But what he did on the ground, 34 carries, 233 yards, 2 touchdowns, dynamic in space, just a tremendous athlete. You just want to get the ball in his hands. Reminds you a little bit of maybe an Antoine Randall L type, the quarterback at Indiana, and ultimately, comes out and is, the number 3 receiver there for the Steelers. Julian Edelman played quarterback. They're guys can make that transition, from quarterback to receiver and vice versa. I think Lynn Bowden just has that versatility to be able to play a multitude of positions. And those are just players that you want to have on your roster. Virginia taking on Florida. Florida wound up getting the win 36-28 in the Orange Bowl. Jonathan Greenard, an edge rusher, a guy who can make some, can pressure the quarterback coming off the edge. I thought it was one of those things that he tried to come first outside and then move back inside. I thought that secondary movement was a little too slow. I thought it's one of those things to where when he's good coming off the edge, he's really good. He can bend pretty well. But if you stifle that first move, he lacks some of that secondary move to get back to the quarterback. So that's something that I think he's going to need to work on and develop further. Lamical Perine, 5'11", 218-pound senior running back. This is a guy, he had a tremendous game. Look, 13 carries, 138 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5 receptions, 43 yards and a touchdown. Excellent hands out of the backfield. Very patient. The right guard was pulling to the left, put his foot in the ground, gets to the hole, to the left of the guard, of the right guard, hits that hole, gets downhill, took it the distance, 61 yards for a touchdown. This is a kid who people aren't really talking about when you're talking about running backs, but I thought that he showed really good hands, showed out pretty well in the All-Star game as well. I think Lamical Perine is someone that is going to fly under radars. He'll be a day 3 guy, but he'll be one of those day 3 running backs, in my opinion, that people are going to be talking about because he can do a little bit of everything. He can run with power. He can run with speed. He's elusive in the open field. He can pass block a little bit, has decent hands coming out of the backfield. Keep an eye on Lamical Perine, number 2 for Florida. I think Jesus Dubois, 6'3", 215-pound receiver, high points the ball really well. High pointed a ball over Marco Wilson in the back of the end zone for a 9-yard touchdown. This is a guy, I think he has tremendous body control, shows a good job tracking the ball over his shoulder. In this game, 10 receptions, 83 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was really the go-to guy. Excellent hands, very reliable target. He's somebody that people aren't going to be talking about, but again, someone who I think can end up making the roster. Is he going to get drafted? Maybe late, but somebody who I think is can be a player. I think he's really shown himself, the second half of the season to be that guy. Bryce Perkins, the quarterback, he's a tremendous athlete. He's going to have to really show in his workouts because he wasn't invited to the combine that he can be a quarterback. At the next level, he may be asked to be a receiver, but I thought that he shows some touch down the field. I thought he was just inconsistent with some of his passing. And then there's Van Jefferson. Look, 6 receptions, 129 yards. The route running here is just, it's at another level. His dad, Sean Jefferson, really, you can tell that he's worked with his father quite a bit. His ability using different releases, his ability to really set up the corner so that the corner is always guessing. What's he gonna do? I just showed you this. I'm gonna show you a slant. Or maybe I showed you a fade and then it's going to be a slant or vice versa. And it's one of those things to where he's able to create that separation, very sudden in and out of his breaks. He's not the best athlete. He's 6'2", just 197 pounds. But when you have that type of nuanced route running ability, that's something that I think really sets him apart. Cal taking on Illinois in the Red Box Bowl. Cal getting the win 35-20 in that contest. Now this was an interesting game to watch because you're really looking at the middle of the field, the inside linebackers, Evan Weaver and DeLay Harding. And for Weaver, over 400 tackles in his career. He's very limited athletically, but, the intelligence is obviously there. He's someone who on first and second downs, playing against the run, takes tremendous angles, scrapes over the top, making plays on the outside, shoots the holes. You know where the football is going to be or where it's going, because that's exactly where Evan Weaver is going. I think he struggles at time, in man-to-man coverage. He'll drop and does a decent job reading the quarterback's eyes when he drops into zone coverage. It's just that lack of athleticism is going to scare teams. But he's one of those guys you have to have on your football team because of those instincts with which he plays. DeLay Harding, another guy, who is very, these guys were number 1 and number 2 in tackles, by the way. I think Harding showed better range overall, sideline to sideline, can play in coverage a little bit as well. Works very well through traffic to get to the ball carrier, diagnoses quickly, shooting through the A gap down the hill. Squares up the running back, drops him for loss, very sure tackler. I think he's one of those guys who they're both going to be day 3 picks. I think DeLay Harding with that athleticism may have the better upside, but Evan Weaver, the instincts, you just can't count out a guy who has instincts like that. Olawale Batiku there for Illinois decided he was going to go ahead and forego his final year of eligibility and enter the draft. 6'3", 250 pounds. Uses his hands well to get off blocks, very quick get off, but one of those guys to where you're really waiting for him to explode. He had such great production at the beginning of the season. Once he got into Big Ten play, struggled to get to the quarterback, did get a sack against Cal, but he's one of those guys. It was frustrating to watch because of his inconsistency. The injury issues there at USC as well. I think that's one, some of the things that he's going to answer for. Going to need to figure some of those things out. Mississippi State and Louisville. Louisville getting the win 38-28 in the Music City Bowl. No Mekhi Becton for Louisville, which was a bummer, but let's see. Willie Gay was finally back there for Mississippi State. He was out. Suspended for early in the year, 8 games total. Then after that, I think there was an issue with a tutor, and then there's an altercation before the bowl game with the quarterback, Garrett Schrader. Ultimately, Garrett Schrader missed the game. I believe it was a broken orbital bone. With Willie Gay, 6'2", 240 pounds, shows really good range sideline to sideline. I think he takes a good path to the football, good angles. I thought he looked stiff in coverage. Does a pretty good job shooting the holes and getting downhill as well. But I think he's stiff in the hips, which is going to really hurt him in coverage. Kylan Hill, the running back there for Mississippi State, 5'11", 215 pounds. The junior decided he's coming back. 7 carries, just 3 yards in this game. I think that had a big impact there on Mississippi State, why they weren't really able to get things going. And one name just to keep an eye out for next year's draft, Tutu Atwell. 9 receptions, 147 yards. He's just 5'9", $153, but led the ACC in receiving yards and just a dynamic player, especially in space. A guy that you got to keep an eye on going forward. Western Kentucky, just edging out Western Michigan in the First Responder Bowl, 23-20. And, with this game, one of the guys that I wanted to watch was D'Angelo Malone. Had 9 tackles in the game there for Western Kentucky. I hadn't gotten to see him play yet. 6'4", 230 pounds. He's a junior. He's coming back. But the Conference USA Defensive Player of the Year, had 90 tackles. This is a guy who's bending, coming around off the edge, really good closing speed. He's an edge rusher. He's going to be a 3-4 outside linebacker, but was playing defensive end there for the Hilltoppers, and very active player, very quick change of direction. He's one of those guys to keep an eye out for in next year's draft. Levante Bellamy, the 5'9", 190-pound running back there for the Broncos of Western Michigan. And, the touchdowns, what was it? Can't read my writing here. 28 total touchdowns, leads the FBS, 5.6 yards per carry. Showed a good stiff arm turning the corner in the game, quick burst around the edge. Guy who plays with a low pad level, low center of gravity. Pretty good contact balance as well. Just 60 yards in this game. Really couldn't get things going. The guy that really stood out was Western Kentucky's receiver, Lucky Jackson. 17 receptions for 148 yards and a touchdown. It seemed like whenever Western Kentucky needed to get something done, whenever Ty Story needed to find a receiver, this was the guy that he was finding. And it's one of those things, he was creating separation, really did a good job setting up his routes. The stem at the top of his routes, really able to create some separation, able to snap that off, run an out route and get open. Showed really good hands. He kept running that out route and he kept getting open, and just the different ways that he was running it. His ability at the top, and showing that inside move, and then able to snap it back to the outside. Lucky Jackson had a tremendous game. Is he somebody who is going to be, that's going to be drafted? That's one of those things. I don't know that he's going to be drafted. He'll probably be a free agent. He'll have to work his way onto a roster, but don't rule him out. Don't rule out Lucky Jackson. You look at the name, you see Lucky. Well, he's somebody who, I don't think it's, just luck. I think he's one of those guys who has a chance to make a roster when it's all said and done. Giovanni Ricci, the 6'3", 240-pound receiver, really a tight end there for Western Michigan. 4 receptions for 20 yards in the game. He's a weapon in the passing game. Showed a decent ability, blocking as well as a lead blocker for running backs, both Bellamy and the other back they had in the offense there, Devon Tucker. And I think that's really what's going to end up happening. He'll probably play the H-back, probably be a second or third tight end, and can catch the ball when needed. But he's really going to have to show that he can make his money as a blocker, because I think that's really what he's going to be utilized at the next level. So getting through those games, that gets us to the Ohio State Clemson game. That was the Fiesta Bowl. That was the second game of the 2 games. 29-23 game there for Clemson. We've already talked about some of the Clemson Tigers. Let's talk about Ohio State a little bit. Chase Young, 16.5 sacks, led the FBS. 2 tackles and a quarterback hurry in this game. And, it was one of those things to where you still saw the athleticism. You saw the ankle flexion bending around the edge. He's one of those guys who, even when he's not making the play, he's still affecting the offense, because you always have to know where he is on the field. You always have to make sure that, if the play is going his way, that you've got multiple guys on him, and most of the time you're trying to avoid him at all costs. I thought Jonah Jackson, the guard there for Ohio State, 6'4", 305, did a really good job keeping his hands inside to control the defensive tackle at the point of attack and pass protection. It was a Rutgers transfer. I think he's one of the better guards in this year's draft. Showed pretty good athleticism as well. Let's see. Tanner Muse. I know I was saying he's a Clemson player that I hadn't talked about yet. 6'2", 230. Did chase down Dobbins on a 64-yard run. Showed really good effort. I think that's really the biggest thing. Took a good angle, showed good effort. He's got decent straight line speed, but man, this guy, he's so stiff in coverage. That's what I'm worried about when you watch Tanner Muse play. Let's get to JK Dobbins. This is my number 1 running back. I think the vision that you see, his ability to see the cutback lanes, puts his foot in the ground early, gets up the field, did a really good job. There's a blitz, able to make the catch off the blitz and get up the field. Really understood that there was a blitz coming, that he was going to be the hot receiver and able to make a play on the ball and get up the field. Excellent hands. I thought the suddenness with the way that he runs, definitely something that you see. Had a diving catch in the flat on a 5-yard touchdown. But he's one of those guys, all he needs is a crease. He's going to have that vision. He's going to find a crease. He's going to get north and south, and he's going to make some plays. And I think that's one of the things for me with J.K. Dobbins. 18 carries, 174 yards, 3 touchdowns on the day in a losing effort. But he's one of those guys, when it's all said and done, he's a special player. He's one of those guys to me I think could end up potentially being a late first round pick when it's all said and done. Malik Harrison, one of the top inside linebackers in this year's draft, 6'3", 245. Did a really good job stringing out Trevor Lawrence, spun him down, really good contain, showed decent speed to the perimeter as well, can play downhill, hits the holes very well. I think he's a better athlete than I was even expecting as well. I think he's somebody who's going to continue to rise up draft boards. And then Jeffrey Okudah, the 6'1", 200-pound corner. I've got him going number 3 to the Lions. Very tight coverage on Justin Ross on comeback. Uses his long arms to his advantage. I think that's one of the things that you really see out of him as well. Let's see. It does a really good job staying on top of routes. Understands what to do with his body, putting his body in a position to make plays. Excellent ball skills, as I said, drives well on the football. He can play in both man, in zone, press man, off coverage. I think he's one of those guys who can be a shutdown cover corner on the outside. And then, we're going to be talking about the LSU Oklahoma game, 63-28. The Peach Bowl, Joe Burrw accounting for just staggering numbers, accounting for 8 touchdowns, 7 touchdown passes, 493 yards, had a touchdown run as well. Burrow was just tremendous in this game. CeeDee Lamb, playing out of the slot, ran a go route, ball thrown to the outside, able to adjust well to the football, away from Jacoby Stevens. Making a play on the football, able to catch the ball over the shoulder, come back to the football, hauls in the pass, squares up, the linebacker, and, ultimately chase down the field 30 yards. He's one of those guys. He's physical on the outside, physical blocker. I think he and Jerry Jeudy are 1A and 1B when it comes to the receivers. It just depends on who you like more. As a team, and when you're drafting, I've got him going to the Raiders, and then I've got Jerry Jeudy. It could be the other way around. Jerry Jeudy going to Indy at number 13. Could be flopped. Flip flop there. Mike Mayock may look at Jerry Jeudy, the route running ability and the explosiveness, and may say that's going to be my guy. It's really pick your poison there when you're talking about the receiver position. I thought Neville Gallimore. Very quick first step, arm over to shoot the gaps. Does a really good job plugging holes against the run, looping around on a stunt, able to get to the quarterback, flush the quarterback from the pocket. His athleticism, he's going to be an early day 2 pick, but a guy who I think has a chance to start early in his career. And then Kenneth Murray, the linebacker there for OU, 6'2", 243 pounds, beat the left tackle block on a stretch play, drilled the running back for a loss coming downhill. Burst just downhill on a blitz, getting to the quarterback, stopping him for 1 yard shy of the first down. Just an explosive player. Biggest issue that I have with him is just gap integrity versus the run. That's the biggest concern that I have for Kenneth Murray. If you look at the Notre Dame game against Iowa State, Camping World Bowl, 33-9 win. Chase Claypool, man among boys, 7 receptions, 146 yards and a touchdown. Couldn't really cover the guy, and really when I look at him, I wonder what he's going to run at the combine. And I think of Darren Waller. I think of the similar body type. You see with the success Darren Waller has had at tight end. And I wonder if Chase Claypool, who's 6'4", 229, 230 pounds, if he wouldn't potentially end up being a tight end at the next level. I thought Alohi Gilman, 5'11", 209, limited athletically, especially in coverage, but very disciplined. Doesn't go for the fakes or anything like that. Stays at home. And, a guy who's going to play downhill very well. But again, doesn't always do a really good job in coverage just because he's so stiff and limited athletically. I thought Troy Pride Jr., 5'11", 194-pound corner, very patient as, on the outside. Good recovery speed, stays on the receiver's hip, no separation as well whenever possible. and he was stride for stride with Lamical Perine, and just shows really good ball skills there on the outside as well. He's one of those guys to where the athleticism. I don't know the technique. And I think he relies on his athleticism more than the technique, and that's really where the technique kind of has to play a little bit of catch up. Cole Kmet really had a breakout season this year, 43 receptions, pretty good route runner. I thought watching this game, does a decent job with his blocking on the outside. Lead block ultimately sprung the quarterback Ian Book on a run to the perimeter. That's one of the things that you saw out of Cole Kmet. I think there are some limitations athletically. He has battled injuries as well. Durability is going to be an absolute concern for him. But he's one of those tight ends. I think he'll be a top 5 tight end when it's all said and done, though. Penn State taking out Memphis 53-39 in the Cotton Bowl. When you watch this, KJ Hamler, he was the guy that I was watching. Just a couple of catches for 46 yards on the day. Journey Brown was the guy that really had a day. 16 carries for 202 yards and 2 touchdowns in the game. But getting back to KJ Hamler, explosive acceleration, very quick in and out of his breaks as well. Just dynamic receiver. I think when it comes to making catches in coverage, in tight coverage, that's really where he struggles a little bit. And I think that's where he's going to fall to the second round because he's a speed rusher. But when you're talking about playing in tight spaces, that's where you're going to have to step up as a receiver. I don't care that you're 5'9", 176. You got to play bigger than you actually are. And I think that's one of the things that KJ Hamler struggles with at times. I thought Bryce Huff is an intriguing guy coming off the edge, shows a pretty good burst, speed rusher coming off the edge, 6'3", 255-pound senior. Yetur Gross-Matos for Penn State, 6'5", 264. I thought that he does gets a good push up the field, using his hands really well, keeping the hands under the pad level, then ripping through and turning the corner. I just think that there's some inconsistency there to Yetur Gross-Matos. His game doesn't always get home as a sack artist. Does a better job versus the run, in my opinion, in the backfield. And I think because of some of that inconsistency, you're going to see Gross-Matos probably fall into round number 2. Penn State, though, keep an eye out for them next year. You'll have Micah Parsons, potential top 10 linebacker, 6'3", 245, excellent range. And then Pat Fryermuth, the tight end, 6'5", 256 pounds, dynamic receiver at the tight end position. He has a chance to be a first rounder if he has a big season next year. Washington State taking on Air Force, 31-21. The victors there go to the Air Force Falcons in the Cheez-It Bowl there at Chase Field in Phoenix, Arizona. I thought Anthony Gordon, 6'3", 210-pound quarterback. This is a guy who didn't play football until his freshman year in high school. Sat behind Gardner Minshew and Luke Falk before he finally got his turn. 28 of 42 for 351 yards and 3 touchdowns on the day. He's one of those guys, has a very quick release, sees the field very well, goes through his progressions, takes what the defense gives him. I think he'll be a day 3 quarterback, but I think he's going to be, after that first crop of quarterbacks, the first 6 guys, he's right in there to be one of the next guys taken there on day 3. Jahad Woods, the linebacker, junior, had 20 tackles on the day. I mean, that's really what happens when you're playing against Air Force. You have to really show some of that range. And that's really, I think, what he did. Max Borghi is going to be a name to talk about in next year's draft, the running back. It reminds you a little bit of Christian McCaffrey because of his hands. More receptions than any other running back. Excellent balance after contact as well. 5'10", 197 pounds. He'll be, like I said, a name to watch. USC taking on Iowa in the Holiday Bowl. Iowa beating the Trojans 42-24. AJ Epenesa, Austin Jackson. This was a fun one to watch. I thought that Austin Jackson, for the most part, did a pretty good job holding his own against AJ Epenesa. I think he'll probably still be a second round pick though, because when he when he looked bad, he looked really bad. And it's one of those things to where Epenesa, he's going to attack. He's going to attack your hands. He's going to really use his power to his advantage, and he overpowered Austin Jackson at times. And it's one of those things to where, Epenesa, he knows he's not the most dynamic athlete coming off the edge, but the technique, his ability, to get his hands into you, he's going to long arm you whenever possible, and just somebody who really sets more of a soft edge coming off the corner, able to drive Jackson back, very physical, like I said, with his hands, clubs his hands away to get to the edge, and really put a lot of pressure on Kedon Slovis in that game. Michael Pittman Jr. Look, Michael Pittman, he's 6'4", 220 pounds, dynamic, a guy who's going to win the 50-50 balls. He's a weapon over the middle, uses his big body in traffic to shield the ball from the defenders. This is a guy, look, over 1,200 yards, led the Pac-12 in receiving, very physical blocker on the outside. He's a tough guy to bring down, does a really good job. You worry about some of the separation. Can he, how fast is he going to run? But he has those subtleties. He doesn't really extend the arm, but he's able to create some of that late separation, getting his arm out on, finding that corner, getting that late separation, able to come up with the football. Teams design their defenses around stopping Michael Pittman Jr. and forcing the likes of Tyler Vaughns and Amon-Ra St. Brown and company to really make plays. And, I thought that's one of the things that Iowa did pretty well, because they limited Michael Pittman to just 6 receptions for 53 yards. Michael Pittman likes to fight for extra yards. He actually lost a fumble in that game. Nate Stanley, the quarterback for Iowa, 6'4", 243 pounds, 66 passing touchdowns in his career, 58% completion percentage. This is a guy who I thought looked really good on his intermediate throws, short and intermediate throws, putting the ball where his receivers can make a play, poise in the pocket, easily rolling away from pressure, keeping his eyes down the football field. 11 of 12 for 130 yards and a touchdown in the first half. Just really got into a rhythm going on this, go route for 35 yards to Ihmir Smith-Marsette, dropping it over his shoulder to the outside. He's somebody, to me, the deep ball accuracy is the biggest concern, but he's someone who I think is going to start rising up some draft boards the more teams get to watch him play. Tristan Wirfs, the right tackle there for Iowa, I've got him going number 11 to the Jets. 6'5", 322 pounds, versatility to play both left and right tackle. Right tackle solely in this game. One of those guys who shows tremendous feet, tremendous power, very light on his feet in pass protection, extending his arms, locks him out, good leg drive, blowing his man off the ball in the running game, generating movement. Slides well to the outside. Let's see. So he was sliding to the outside against Kristian Rector, who made a spin back to the inside, easily able to change direction and get back in front of him and stifle that secondary move. That's what you really want to see. I thought his punch was very consistent as well. Got the hands inside the defensive end, and once that happened, he has the power to basically control his man. When you think of Iowa, you don't think of explosive receivers on the outside, but I'll tell you, Ihmir Smith-Marsette, 6'1", 183 pounds, the junior, had the speed on a 98-yard kickoff return for a touchdown, was a receiver that just was making plays left and right, had just a couple of receptions for 46 yards and a touchdown, had 2 carries for 15 yards and another score. Speed kills, and I thought he really showcased that for the Hawkeyes in their win. Texas A&M taking out Oklahoma State 24-21 in the Texas Bowl, played in NRG Stadium, virtual home game there for the Aggies. Chuba Hubbard deciding he's going to come back to Stillwater for one more year, 19 carries, 158 yards in that game. Justin Madubuike, the defensive tackle, decided that he's going to skip the game, didn't play in the bowl game. So, when you're talking about draft eligible prospects, there really weren't any that to really speak of outside of AJ Green. I thought AJ Green really did a good job 3-year starter, excellent tackling. There was a swing pass to the running back Isaiah Spiller, came downhill to drop him in the open field. He's the guy who also played really well in the Senior Bowl. Pretty good cover corner on the outside. Doesn't really panic. Uses his length to his advantage. So I thought he was the guy to me that stood out the most from a draft perspective for this year's draft, I should say. Let's see. Michigan State taking out Wake Forest 27-21. Turns out this is Mark D'Antonio's last game. Pinstripe Bowl, Yankee Stadium. Let's see. Josiah Scott, the field corner, fluid hips, turning and running with the receiver. I thought he looked really sharp in this game. Let's see. Justin Herbert, the left tackle there for Wake Forest, 6'5", 290 pounds, getting his hands on the defensive end early. That's really where he won. I thought he anchors very well against the bull rush. I think of Justin School for Vanderbilt, and I think Justin Heron's going to be similar to that, a guy who's probably going to be a day 3 pick, 5th, 6th rounder, but a guy who could probably end up stepping in as a starter, a spot starter, if anyone goes down to injury. I thought Isang Bassi struggled at times. He's one of those guys, he's 5'10", 190 pounds. He'll probably be a guy who's going to play in the slot. Pretty good tackler, but he does a pretty good job as well with the ball skills. But he usually goes to break the ball up and rather than actually pick the football off. But I thought he struggled in this game a little bit. Kenny Willekes, this is a guy who is very quick off the ball. Does a really good job coming off the edge. A defensive lineman of the year in the Big Ten last year, former walk-on, tireless worker. But he struggles to get off blocks at times, and that's one of the things that's worrisome. He's 6'4", 260 pounds. Is he going to be an outside linebacker? Chase Winovich showed that he could do that with the Patriots. He's somebody, to me, I think at the Combine, he's going to have to show that he can be a dynamic playmaker in space. I just don't know if he's going to be able to do that. Let's see, North Carolina, 55-13, big winners in the Military Bowl over Temple. And look, the guys that really played well were the underclassmen. Sam Howell, the quarterback, just really dominated as the passer in this game. 25 of 34, 294 yards, 3 touchdowns in the game. Also did it on the ground, showed really good athleticism. Then Quincy Roche over there for Temple, 6'4", 235 pounds. He's on his way to Miami for a senior season. I thought Dominique Ross, the linebacker, showed pretty good range. Chaz Surratt, Sage's brother. Sage is the receiver for Wake Forest. But Chaz Surratt, 6'3", 230 pounds, converted cornerback, over 100 tackles, moves really well laterally versus the run, blitzes, gets off blocks, able to get to the quarterback. Can he cover? That's really going to be the big question mark. But he's got another year. He and his brother both deciding to return to their respective schools. Charlie Heck, the tackle there for UNC, probably the top draft eligible prospect. Excellent length. I thought that he did a pretty good job overall silencing Quincy Roche. There were times where he did get overset, and that's really what he has to watch for. Was beaten when I'm sorry, I keep calling Roche. It's Quincy Roche. When he had leverage under him, so he's 6'8", so he's got to really work on getting that pad level down. And that's really when he didn't do that. That's when he struggled. Let's see, Pittsburgh taking out Eastern Michigan 34-30. This was kind of a wild game, especially at the end in the Quick Lane Bowl. Mike Glass throwing some punches, ended up getting booted from that game. Maurice French for Pittsburgh, 5'11", 200 pounds. This is a guy who's probably not going to be drafted, but 7.6 receptions per game in his career, which is school record, broke Larry Fitzgerald's record there. Thought he was pretty sudden as a receiver. Good athleticism, able to make guys miss in space. 12 receptions, 185 yards, and a touchdown on the day. Very explosive, and somebody who I think, he's going to have to play out of the slot. And there's just so many receivers in this draft class. He's one of those guys who's going to be a forgotten name. I really kind of forgot about him myself until I watched the bowl game and I said, wait a minute, we can't forget about this kid. And then Dane Jackson, Pittsburgh's corner, 6 foot, 190 pounds, 40 starts to his credit. Bail technique, eyes in the backfield, read the throw, able to drive on the play, had a near interception. Drives quickly on the football on a back shoulder throw, able to use his length to get in, get a hand in, and break that play up. Shows pretty good speed, especially makeup speed. There was an out route in tight coverage, was on the receiver's hip, able to extend and knock the ball away as well. I think Dane Jackson underrated as a corner there on the outside. Let's see, Miami against Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech beating Miami 14-0 in the Independence Bowl. I thought this was going to be a game where I'd get to watch Amik Robertson for the last time, the 5'9" corner. Excellent ball skills, but he decided he would forego this game and just make himself eligible for the draft. I thought Shaq Quarterman was probably the top draft eligible prospect in this draft, in this game. Stiff hips in coverage, but did a really good job flowing sideline to sideline. Playmaker, the biggest question, and I think it's always been his thing, is whether or not he can drop into coverage. I think he does everything else really well, scrapes over the top on run plays to the outside, does a good job shooting gaps, can blitz the quarterback a little bit. It's just going to come down to whether or not he can drop into coverage, and that's really going to make the biggest impact on his draft stock. But if you want a name for a couple of years from now as a pass rusher, who's going to be the next Chase Young? How about Gregory Rousseau, 6'6", 260-pound freshman. This guy is just an absolute beast. Uses excellent length, 18 tackles for loss, 14 sacks. He's going to be a monster coming off the edge for years to come. Let's see. Hawaii and BYU, 38-34, Hawaii winners in the Hawaii Bowl. I know we talked about this bowl game in a past podcast, so we've actually made it through all of our bowl games now. But Cole McDonald is the intriguing quarterback. He's entered the draft, 493 yards passing and 4 touchdowns. Keep an eye on him at the combine. He's one of those guys to where he'll be battling the likes of Anthony Gordon and Jalen Hurts. Those are going to be guys that he'll be battling, and I thought that he looked dynamic in this game. He has tremendous arm strength, throwing the football down the field. I thought he really did a good job threading the needle up the seam, hitting his receivers in stride. The ball placement, I think he really caught fire at the right time at the end of the season. He's really making teams catch notice, and he'll be a guy, he won't be drafted until day 3, but I think he's going to make a roster, and he's shown that he had a really difficult start to the season, 4 interceptions against Arizona, bounced back in a big way and took Hawaii to a bowl game. And not only to the bowl game, but they ended up winning the bowl game, and he was the MVP of this game. And, you can't miss him. He's 6'4", 220, but it's not the size that is really going to draw you to him. It's going to be the dreads, the blonde dreads that he has that, he says that he wears those in honor of former Hawaii quarterback Bryant Muniz. So we've covered the bowl games, the other bowl games in past podcasts. I'm not going to go ahead and rehash some of the other bowl games, but East-West Shrine Bowl, East taking down the West, 31-27 in the game. James Morgan, 9 of 14 for 116 yards and a touchdown. This is a guy who, he has tremendous arm strength. I've talked about FIU in the past. I think he's someone who has a chance to get drafted late. Benny LeMay, I thought, showed, pretty good, not only pad level, he showed some pretty good explosiveness, runs hard between the tackles. Mentioned Jamarcus Bradley. He had 2 catches, 27 yards, and a touchdown in that game as well. John Runyon moved inside to guard. I thought both he and Michael Onwenu, by the way, holy cow, this kid, big dude there at the guard position, and very physical. Really a road grader, and he impressed me a lot more than I thought. I thought didn't expect him to be that dynamic of a player. Let's see who else had a good game or just really showed up well. Derek Tuska, there for North Dakota State. He's a pretty good athlete coming off the edge there as a pass rusher. Wasn't expecting to see that from him. I thought he was somebody who, I'm going to have to continue to go back and study a little bit more because he showed, he can be dynamic coming off the edge. Luke Barku, San Diego State, 6'1", 175. Man, this guy, 9 interceptions in 2019, but very, very handsy. He just couldn't stop grabbing receivers, called for pass interference. He's going to have to get that cleaned up if he wants to be worthy of being drafted. Parker Houston, the tight end out of San Diego State, 6'2", 251, H-back, fullback type, lead blocker, showed blowing up holes. I think fullback is where he can end up playing, and teams that need a traditional fullback might want to think about Parker Houston. I thought Adrian Killins showing explosive speed, the 5'7", 184-pound running back out of Central Florida. He's shown that he can be a draft eligible guy. That's speed on the outside. That's definitely something that's going to draw your attention to him. I thought Darrell Williams showed a pretty good job, handling John Pennicini on the inside, sealing him off. Also climbing to the second level, found Dante Olson, the linebacker out of Montana, ultimately springing Adrian Killins, allowing him to make a play down the football field. Michael Pinckney showed some pretty good range. Not only making plays sideline to sideline, also coming downhill, able to do that as well. He actually showed up a lot better than I thought he was going to. I mentioned Tuska. I found his notes. Slap and rip to beat Matt Womack, beat him off the edge, forced a hold. Stutter versus Womack, who overset, shot inside, crossed his face, flushed the quarterback from the pocket, got inside the tackle again. Matt Womack hit the quarterback really did a good job attacking whenever possible, attacking the hands, using a chop, and was pretty explosive coming off the edge. I thought James Robinson, the running back out of Illinois State, 5'9", 214 pounds, FCS All-American, showed pretty good hands as a receiver. Took a screen pass, able to kind of stutter, cut back across the field, showed some speed. Doesn't really have that top end speed to really take the top off of a defense. He is 214 pounds, but over 1,900 yards on the ground and 23 touchdowns there for Illinois State. He'll be an interesting guy to keep an eye out for. He did get a combine invite, by the way, so it'll be fun to watch him. Calvin Throckmorton, 6'5", 313, guard tackle for Oregon. Looks like he's more comfortable at the guard position. Showed some pretty good athleticism climbing to the second level. But look, when you get to the second level, you got to make a block on someone. Whiffed on the block. Doesn't always sustain the blocks as well, but he's a veteran. He's versatile, but I think there are some holes to his game. Mentioned DeLay Harding, Tampa 2, middle linebacker, able to drop into coverage. I think he's one of those guys that shows excellent range, 153 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, 3 forced fumbles. He's really what you want in a middle linebacker because he doesn't have to come off the field on third down. He can drop into coverage and play pretty well in space. Trevor Wallace Sims, the 6'4", 339-pound guard or center there from Missouri, showed pretty good feet to pick up McTelvin Agim, but couldn't really handle the speed of Michael Dana. I thought Michael Dana, really able to separate himself from some of the other players there for Michigan. Didn't start, and so you're really worried about that, but so powerful with his hands. I thought that was one of the things that really, really jumped out, was just how powerful the hands were. Let's see. Alex Highsmith, showed a pretty good job, with shooting into the backfield. He'd also start inside, spin move back to the outside. Mentioned Kevin Dotson earlier, 6'4", 324-pound guard out of Louisiana. Good power in his hands, finishing blocks as well. That's something that kind of jumped out a little bit. So those are some of the guys that stood out to me in the East-West Shrine game. And then Senior Bowl, Justin Herbert ended up getting the MVP performance. Also was the practice MVP. I thought Jordan Love had, there were question marks about his decision making, but I think at the end of the day, he showcased his athleticism. I thought that he helped himself at the Senior Bowl. Michael Pittman Jr. in the one-on-ones, the contested catches really jumps off the charts. He's very physical as a receiver as well, and I think that really you really saw that. Zach Bond showing a spin move to beat Matt Perk, coming off the edge in one-on-ones. Logan Wilson dropping into coverage underneath of Courtney Davis, able to make a leaping interception. That was in the team play. Matt Hennessy got off balance against Laurel Murchison, overset, and the defensive tackle able to ultimately get by him. But I thought that he showed really good lateral agility throughout the practices, and that really stood out for me there. Neville Gallimore showing some quickness off the football. That was really giving some teams or some guys some trouble. I thought Josh Uche was tremendous, not only as an edge rusher getting around the edge, but also showing an ability to drop into coverage. James Prochet out of SMU, quick cuts. I thought that was one of the things that really stood out to me. But KJ Hill, I think he really solidified himself. Just the route running ability of the Ohio State wide receivers. A year ago, it was Terry McLaurin. KJ Hill, similar to that. I thought Ben Bredesen showed pretty good hands, getting the hands under a game. Kept him inside. Really good feet. Let's see, 9-on-7. Turned the defensive tackle to the outside, sealed them off. Good hips off the snap. Opened up a nice hole. Really strong hands. Once he locked onto you, then he wasn't letting go. I thought Colton McKivitz out of West Virginia was just really slow in the one-on-ones, was really struggling to keep anybody in front of him. Bradley and I, again, the hand usage, able to use his hands to beat Matt Pert, a couple of times. I thought it was one of those things to where he's attacking the hands, using the handwork, slapping guys' hands away, and a lot of times he'd hand fight. He'd actually be locking up hands with the tackle, able to work through that and turn the corner. Then Jason Strobridge of UNC, 6'5", 285, showing good burst off the ball. A guy who was getting up the field, has 22 tackles for loss and 11.5 sacks in his career. I think he could be a 34. A 5 technique in a 34 defense. Let's see, Denzel Mims making catches all over the field. Very physical with his hands on. Let's see, coming off the ball. Quick release. I have that noted here. High pointing the ball in the back of the end zone. Spectacular catch, extending over Terrell Burgess to make a touchdown in practice. I thought that was one of the things that stuck out for me. Malik Harrison, really good lateral movement, quick recognition against the run, vision in the running game as well. Able to drop into coverage, had an interception during the practice as well. So that was kind of the north side. When you look at the south side, it was all about Javon Kinlaw. Could not be blocked. Explosive, the speed to power, excellent power in his hands, virtually unblockable. He's one of those guys to me who, if he's not a top 10 pick, he'll be, off the board by 14 to Tampa. Mentioned Justin Herbert. We talked about him when he was in rhythm, very accurate with the football. You really want to move him off his mark. That's really where he's going to struggle at times. Let's see, who else do we have? Lloyd Cushenberry, very good anchor versus Kinlaw. One of the few guys that actually kept Kinlaw in front of him. Excellent length, good base, good lateral quickness as well. When he got too far over his toes, that's really when he got beaten. But when he stays, stays with those knees bent and stays upright, that's really where Lloyd Cushenberry is at his best. He could end up being the top corner, or I'm sorry, top center in this year's draft. Terrell Lewis shows incredible potential, very explosive coming off the edge, able to bend, the speed, the power in his hands coming off the edge there. Let's see. I thought Trevis Gibson out of Tulsa didn't have a very good week. Pad level too high, was just getting blown up. But Terrence Steele, the right tackle, 6'6", 310 pounds out of Texas Tech, he showed effortless footwork. He did a really good job handling Anthony Jennings, picked up Jonathan Greenard coming off the edge, did a really good job there as well, keeping the quarterback in the pocket. He stood up Gibson on the one-on-one as well. Got right under his pad level when it got too high. Van Jefferson, very quick in and out of his breaks, attacks the ball over the middle, adjusts to the ball in the air, and really does a good job adjusting his route as well. Not only just adjusting to the football, but adjusting the route, finding the opening in the defense. Eno Benjamin showed good hands as a receiver, lateral quickness, able to find the holes that way. And then Robert Windsor, the defensive tackle out of Penn State, showed pretty good pop in his hands, pretty athletic. He's just 285 pounds at the defensive tackle position, but really a hard worker. Quickness to beat the center from San Diego State, Keith Ishmael. Let's see. Flashed, I just have there over and over, flashed inside. He was one of those guys, hard worker, very explosive. Ben Barch, this is a guy who, D3 guy, reminds you of Ali Marpet, second team All-American. Very good hand placement, good knee bend. You see the ankle flexion as well. He looked like he belonged there. And, I think when he really was winning was when he got his hands on the defensive end early. When he did that, he really stifled anything moving forward. I thought Steven Montez, Shea Patterson struggled mightily. They're going to struggle to get drafted, in my opinion. And then Alex Taylor out of South Carolina State, the big 6'8" tackle, shows some promise, very light on his feet, but man, his legs are skinny. You wonder, if he's going to be able to anchor, how he doesn't have that wide of a base. He's going to have to be a developmental guy, someone who I think has really good athleticism, but you got to get him in the weight room, work on that lower body. So those were the bowl games and the All-Star games. Got to make it through all of those. I'm going to give you a quick sneak peek, because we are going to be talking about my mock drafts in the coming weeks with our podcasts, but I wanted to at least give you a quick sneak peek before we end things with episode 20 here of the Ready for the Draft podcast. Top 10 of my first mock draft. I mentioned already Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Burrow going number 1 overall. No brainer there. 6'4", 216 pounds out of LSU. Number 2, another no-brainer, Washington Redskins. You've got Ron Rivera. You've got Jack Del Rio. Emphasis on defense. Chase Young going to be the pick. 6'5", 265 pounds, defensive end out of Ohio State. The junior, you pair him up with Ryan Kerrigan and Montez Sweat coming off the edge. That's going to be very explosive, in terms of those pass rushers. Those are going to be guys who are really going to affect the quarterback, and knowing where those guys are on the field at all times. I think Ryan Kerrigan's going to get some help, some much needed help. Matt Ioannidis is another guy, the defensive end, who really, showed up very well. He actually led the Redskins in sacks because Kerrigan was battling some injuries. I think Chase Young in there adds a different dynamic because you have to know where Chase Young is on the field at all times. Number 3, Detroit Lions. Mentioned Jeffrey Okudah. He is going number 3, 6'1", 200 pounds, corner out of Ohio State, the junior. Look, when you look at this, Darius Slay, he's quietly become one of the best corners in the league, but he's desperate need of a running mate. I think what you're going to have here, Justin Coleman is going to be a slot receiver. Amani Oruwariye stepped up pretty big as a 5th round pick late in the season. I think at the end of the day, you could see Derek Brown here. I wouldn't rule that out just yet. I think he could take some pressure, with his versatility to both rush the passer and affect the run game with his power, his speed to power. Take some pressure off Trey Flowers coming off the edge. So I wouldn't rule out Derek Brown at this point, but I think Jeffrey Okudah, that's the guy that you really need, and he's clearly the top corner, and I think it kind of drops off after that. I mentioned Jedrick Wills going to the Giants. Number 4 overall pick. Dave Gettleman, where's he really going to go with this? Could he go receiver? Because you've got, Sterling Shepard, Golden Tate, Darius Slayton, but not a number 1 target. CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, it's always possible there. You look at, pass rushers that could use another pass rusher. Chase Young's no way he's going to be on the board. They're not reaching for A.J. Epinesa or Kalavin Chase on here. Just don't see that happening. Okudah, if he's still here, he could be that corner. DeAndre Baker struggled a little bit. Janoris Jenkins is no longer on the roster. He got waived. I think they're going to go with a free agent corner, but wouldn't rule out Jeffrey Okudah. Then there's the playmaker, Isaiah Simmons. Plays all over the field. That could be a potential there for the Giant defense, but I think protecting your investment, protecting Daniel Jones is what you're going to need at the end of the day. You've got Nate Solder on the left side. Mike Remmers is gone at right tackle. Bring in Jedrick Wills. Miami has 3 first-round picks. Their first one at number 5, Tua Tagovailoa, the 6'1", 218-pound quarterback out of Alabama, the junior. Heisman runner-up as a sophomore. Took the Bama to the national championship, won the national championship over Georgia as a freshman. As a junior, the hip injury, broken hip, sounds like he's going to recover and return to health. And look, if that injury doesn't happen, he may still end up being the first overall pick in this year's draft. He, even for as dynamic as Joe Burrow was, Tua, just the instincts, the ability to know where he's going to go with the football, throwing the receivers open, the ball placement. Tua he's a dynamic player. The problem is the durability concerns now. The 2 high ankle sprains and now the hip. You're going to have to study the medicals. You're going to have to make sure that stays right. The other issue is where do those things happen? Outside the pocket. Tua now, with those injuries, being injury prone, he's going to have to stay within the pocket a little bit more, have to be a more Aaron Rodgers than Patrick Mahomes. And so is that going to affect his draft status a little bit? That's remains to be seen. But I think firmly Miami is going to want Tua. And, that may not actually be a bad thing given, Miami's really prepping for the future, with those 3 first rounders. You can get an offensive tackle. You can get an edge rusher later on in the draft. And I have that, that's really what I'm expecting Miami to do. Chargers at number 6. Could they go tackle? Sure. Russell Okung, his health, is questionable. If Wills is there, he could be the pick. Mekhi Becton, Tristan Wirfs. Sam Tevye at right tackle struggled as well, so tackle definitely makes a lot of sense. But look, Phillip Rivers is gone. I think they're moving on from him. You haven't had a quarterback there since, not named Drew Brees or Phillip Rivers since 2001. So I think even if the Chargers find a veteran in free agency or they decide they're going to stick with a Tyrod Taylor, I think Justin Herbert out of Oregon is going to end up being their guy there. Here's the thing. I'm going to throw this out there into the universe right now. Jordan Love. Remember that name for the Chargers. I think of Daniel Jones and the fact that, a lot of people thought that Dwayne Haskins was the better quarterback, but Dave Gettleman fell in love with Daniel Jones, and that was their guy. And, Daniel Jones had the question marks, some questionable decision making, but the intangibles were there. You look at Jordan Love, he has the athleticism, all the physical tools, some good intangibles, but questionable decision making. Although he loses his head coach, Matt Wells, goes to Texas Tech, also loses out on, I believe it was 5 of his top targets. Lost a running back, 3 receivers, a tight end. A couple of those guys ended up playing in the NFL. So stories seem to be a little bit similar. We'll see what Jordan Love and Justin Herbert do at the combine. See if Jordan Love can close the gap there on Justin Herbert. I still have at the end of the day that it's going to be Justin Herbert here at number 6, but there is a chance that Jordan Love could, if ultimately the Chargers are enamored with him, that he can end up moving above Justin Herbert like we saw last year with Daniel Jones. Number 7, Carolina. This is going to be one of 2 picks. I really firmly believe that. It's going to either be a defensive tackle, and that's going to be Derek Brown. And really they're losing a lot of guys here. The Panthers, they finished second in the league in sacks, but 29 of their 53 sacks were registered by 4 players. 3 defensive ends, Gerald McCoy, Mario Addison, and Bruce Irvin. And then the defensive tackle is Vernon Butler. All of them are free agents. I don't see them reaching for Chason or Epenesa here. I think they'd have to trade back if that's the direction that they're going. I think the value isn't there. I think an interior pass rusher, though, like Derek Brown or Javon Kinlaw will make a lot of sense. I think at the end of the day, though, Luke Kuechly and his sudden retirement really calls into question. That's a 5-time first-team All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowler, AP Defensive Player of the Year in 2013, averaged 137 tackles a game, racking up 18 interceptions, 12.5 tackles for loss, 7 forced fumbles. Guy's going to be a Hall of Famer, even if it's an abbreviated career. Just a playmaker from day one when he came out of Boston College. You need to have that linebacker, that presence. And I thought that, Isaiah Simmons, embodies the production, the versatility, the range that Luke Kuechly has. And I think he'd be a day one starter and a guy that Matt Rule can really, really take that defense with Carolina and build around Isaiah Simmons. At number 8, the Arizona Cardinals. Look, you got Kyler Murray. He's the AP Offensive Rookie of the Year. Arizona finishes the season 5-10-1. A lot of people are expecting, Arizona to go with a receiver like CeeDee Lamb to reunite him with Kyler Murray because Larry Fitzgerald isn't getting any younger, but he did announce that he's coming back for his 2020 season. They also drafted 3 receivers a season ago. I couldn't see them going with yet another receiver, especially with the first overall pick. But look, the offensive tackles, this is the 3rd straight year the Cardinals have given up 50 or more sacks. It's just simply unacceptable. You've got your number 1 overall pick from a season ago, Kyler Murray, back there. You've got to protect him. Tackles, DJ Humphries, Marcus Gilbert, Jordan Mills, all unrestricted free agents. Arizona primed to land one of the top offensive tackles in the draft. I think it's going to be Andrew Thomas out of Georgia, 6'5", 320 pounds, still working as a pass blocker, but I think he's got nimble feet and really a road grader in the running game. I don't necessarily like the angle that he takes. He really extends his arms and kind of extends out instead of staying upright and, getting over his toes. That's one of the things, and overextending himself. That's really what I worry about more than anything else. Jags, I think if Derek Brown is still on the board, this is an easy one for them. 6'5", 325, the defensive tackle out of Auburn. Marcel Darius could be a cap casualty, which would then leave Taven Bryan and Avery Jones as the only defensive tackles on the roster with any significant playing time from a season ago. If Brown isn't there, then I think Javon Kinlaw is your pick. And that's really where Javon Kinlaw can really sneak into the first round. I think, into the top 10. Carolina, if they go Brown and somehow Simmons is not on the board, like say the Giants took Simmons and then Brown goes to Carolina, I think this is another scenario where Javon Kinlaw goes to the Jags. And then finally at number 10, Cleveland Browns. Look, Baker Mayfield, you can talk about Baker all you want about how he regressed and about how this was a guy who just would not step up in the pocket. He was rolling left, rolling right, and just wouldn't manipulate the pocket, wouldn't keep his eyes downfield. And the thing with it was his offensive line was just terrible. We had Greg Robinson at left tackle. You had Chris Hubbard at right tackle. They struggled. A season ago he was under pressure left and right. Desmond Harrison was a tackle that was a developmental tackle that was thrust into a starting job, and really Baker. When you're under pressure like that, even when the rush isn't there coming up the middle, you've ingrained and trained your brain to really, where's my escape route? It's going to be towards the sideline. It's going to be laterally and not necessarily up into the pocket. Just step up, just make a couple of those subtle movements. You don't need to be so drastic and rolling out all the time, especially when you got into the red zone. You got to protect your quarterback, got to protect your investment yet again. And look, Baker Mayfield played with Orlando Brown Jr. At Oklahoma, and Orlando Brown Jr. is a big dude, 6'7", 350, 360 pounds, and just a mammoth of a man, very powerful. And Baker Mayfield, very used to playing with a guy that big. How about Mekhi Becton? 6'7", 368 pounds, a junior out of Louisville. You worry about Baker Mayfield's size, but that's why I brought up the fact that he has played with a big left tackle. And Mekhi Becton, this guy's a dancing bear, man. He's huge, but he's very light on his feet. And if you watch any of his game film in the running game, this guy just buries people. It's not even funny. I mean, he just takes the guy and just throws him out of the club. I mean, just so powerful with his hands, just throws guys down, buries them, finishes them, embarrasses them. I think you put him there with Baker Mayfield, and you finally have a left tackle that's going to allow Baker to make some plays within the confines of the pocket. So there you have it. That's my top 10, my first top 10. And frankly, what I've found over the last couple of years is my first mock draft is more accurate than my last mock draft. So who knows? 6, 7 of these picks may actually be right. I'll probably end up adjusting them, and then we'll look at April, and I'll probably be off. And we'll look back at these picks here, these 10 picks, and you know what, I might be 70% right, because that's usually what ends up happening with my mock draft. So we'll see how things go. So over the next couple of weeks, we'll be getting ready for the combine. I mentioned 337 players. I've gotten to see the majority of these guys play, and I want to make sure that we're breaking these down. We'll probably divide them up between offense and defense, take a look at all of the players, talk about them, go position by position, really what to expect, who we're going to be watching out for, who's going to, again, be the players that have the most to lose, the guys who really need to step up, guys under the radar who are going to have big games, big workouts, who are going to be the workout warriors. And then we'll be able to start getting into the mock drafts really, really furiously after that. We'll also be taking a look at position by position, how players rank, where we see them coming off the board in the draft, day 1, day 2, day 3, and then really getting into, are they, what round I see them going. We'll start getting into some of those conversations as things go along, and you can expect at least one podcast each and every week. And as we start getting closer and closer in April to that draft in Vegas, Bellagio fountains, I think this is going to be so cool. I can't wait to see that. You'll probably be seeing more than one podcast a week, and I'll be looking forward to delivering all of all the content to you, all of my thoughts, and hopefully get you ready for the NFL draft. So until then, enjoy your weekend, enjoy your time, next week as well. And we'll go ahead and start this all up and do it all over again. Hope you've enjoyed this podcast. I've enjoyed bringing it to you. It's been a couple of weeks, and glad to go ahead and jump back into things. So for readyforthedraft.com, this has been the Ready for the Draft podcast. I have been your host, Gregg Schutze. I've enjoyed every minute of it. I hope you have too. Until next time, everyone, I am out of here. Take care.